my god, shut up, I'm trying to record.
Yeah.
For being an industry that runs almost entirely off the backs of gamers, gaming doesn't really exactly give consumers a whole lot of choice. Projects will go the way that the developers want, things will turn out the way companies desire, and you know what, that's perfectly fine. It's their money, it's their project, how they choose to go about it is completely up to them. The most power that consumers do have is in their wallets. And I'm overplaying that because a lot of consumers are retarded. They'll sit back and watch slowly as each passing year, franchises become stripped of the majority of elements that made them what they were to begin with, and games become a lot more bare bones over time. And you know what? When they get screwed over and continue to buy those games, I don't feel sorry for them at all. I really don't. I haven't bought Battlefield since Battlefield 1. I haven't bought a Call of Duty game since I was a console peasant. And that's the most I can do, and the most you can do. Everybody else is just retarded. They're just going to continue to dump their money into these games and into these franchises and wonder, huh? What? Huh?
What?
Because this industry thrives off of the casual plebs. People will see something with a soldier on the cover and they'll be like, hey shit, that looks cool, I'm gonna get that. Boom boom pow pow shoot shoot. Have fun for a few minutes, and that's about it. Gaming is a lot more mainstream. It's a lot more popular. It's a lot more accepted. Gaming is cool. While I was that kid on the playground that was talking about Banjo-Kazooie, people were playing with Yu-Gi-Oh cards looking at me like I was some scrub. Now you go to the playgrounds and it's a bunch of kids doing the L dance.
So terms like mental retardation, terms like autism or autistic child has its own stigma attached to it.
But that's the industry now. The gaming that you and I, depending on how old you are in my audience, the gaming you and I grew up with was much different than what it is now. A huge part of that has to do with the internet taking influence, not just in culture, but also in how games would be distributed, how it would affect games. You no longer have to release a game with everything on the disc. You can now, over time, patch the rest of the game through the power of the internet. You can now distribute your games digitally to millions of people out there. You don't have to worry about your game being half-assed at release and a buggy mess, because you can fix it over time through the power of the internet. But hold on, the internet is just much more than a simple tool that these companies and corporations can use to scam gamers. It's also a viable weapon against them. Thus the power of reviews. Something like the internet can give a voice to the most untalented, uncreative jackasses like me, who'll come here and nag about the industry. And that very power is something that these companies hate. They hate it, because those reviews can influence the purchasing decision of your retarded Joe who sits on the sidelines not knowing what this game is about, but it looks pretty. He won't know until he opens up the reviews. Reviews have a huge amount of influence. They're a gamer's best friend, depending on who's doing them, of course. Gamers, they know this, and they know it very well, because let's face it, developers and certain people in corporations are some thin-skinned little bitches who can't take the slightest bit of criticism, with mass blockings, talking shit about consumers. Very weak and fragile individuals, who for some reason are continuously backed by these corporations. I mean, if I was one of these companies, I would look at one of these weaklings and fire them. There's the fucking door. You're here to make games. Nothing more, nothing less. Do your fucking job. Stop getting consumers to hate us. And as I've said, gamers, they know very well what reviews can do. And because of that, they've been able to weaponize reviews through a practice known as review bombing. For me personally, review bombing is a gray area, and yet I still side more with review bombing more than anything else. It's the #1 way for gamers to have their voice heard, and the best way they can influence people into not buying a product. And the companies hate it so much. For good reason. I don't want to get too much into the ethics of review bombing because that would be an hour-long video. And if I want to stick to this weekly upload schedule, I can't have videos that long. So suck a dick. You guys are the ones that complained about me not uploading enough. You're getting videos. Shut up. Oddly enough, this is the third video that involves Steam this week. Review bombing can absolutely hurt a product and a company's reputation. Not necessarily because the product itself is bad though, but more so to do that consumers have a way to protest against a corporation doing things that they don't like in general. It is essentially being unfair with your review of a game in order to turn the tides of the overall reception of that game to catch the attention of companies and developers. And whether you agree with it or not, it's extremely effective in getting done what it needs to get done. Because when you look at it, aside from pulling their money, review bombing is all consumers have. That's it. That is literally all they have. Because do you think people like Digital Foundry or Linus Tech Tips or GameSpot or IGN, do you think they would side with consumers? Of course not. These guys are given review copies of things, and they're there to give an objective review, while keeping their personal opinions on matters behind the scenes away. Oddly enough, the largest voices with the most credibility can provide absolutely no use to consumers in this sense. Review bombing is very effective. So effective, in fact, that it's caught the attention of Valve, aka those guys that made Steam, and review bombing is a huge thing on Steam. For instance, Metro Exodus. The page for the game can be found on Steam, but guess what happened? Last minute decision, they decided to put that game on Epic Games Store, meaning everybody waiting on Steam was pretty fucking pissed. The game itself is great, it's fantastic. Surely you wouldn't just thumbs down this game, all because it didn't release on Steam, but nope, that's exactly what happened, and you know what? For a good reason. Metro Exodus is one of those games that received the review bomb treatment for the fact that the publishers decided to become total asshats, making a last-minute decision and screwing over Steam users who had long awaited for a release where they were expecting. One of those last-minute middle fingers. Now obviously, those publishers are stupid because they won't receive near the same amount on the Epic Store as they would on Steam, or both platforms, but as we all know, Epic Games Store is in that position where they're like, it's just us and no one else. And I've already talked about that in my previous video. Fuck the Epic Games Store. Nothing new here. This is one of those situations where many agree that review bombing Metro Exodus on the Steam page was justified. Whether it was ethical or not is an entirely different debate to be had. The publisher screwed everyone over at the very last minute, and they did not like the fact that people were mad at them, which makes no sense whatsoever. People were pissed at you because you guys were being assholes, and yet one of the developers has the nerve to tell PC players that if they decide to boycott Metro, they won't be seeing an installment of the series on the PC ever again. Why would you do this? Why? Of course, damage control had to be done to ensure everyone that that developer was a retard, but you kind of get where he's coming from. You put your passion and your soul into a project, and it's a damn good project, an amazing project. Blood, sweat, and tears went into making it. But the company you're involved with decides they're going to take a different approach in publishing the game. You have no say in the matter, and ultimately because of that, a lot of angry people come and review bomb your game. It's a low blow, and you're practically the victim here, which is why review bombing is questionable at times. Innocent bystanders are shot when the target is right behind them. And it's situations like this that has pushed Valve to do something about review bombing. Valve has announced it's revisiting user reviews on Steam in order to combat review bombing. In a blog post, Valve wrote it will now identify off-topic review bombs and remove them from the review score. We define an off-topic review bomb as one where the focus of those reviews is on a topic that we consider unrelated to the likelihood that future purchasers will be happy if they buy the game, and hence not something that should be added to the review score. Valve continued, the company admits there's still a bit of a gray area with this definition, so it's developed a tool that identifies any anomalous review activity on all games on Steam in as close to real time as possible. Quite a bit to worry about here. First off, if your definition of an off-topic review is a pretty gray area for most people, how in the world do you expect a computer tool to be any better at making that judgment? Just take a look at the YouTube algorithm. Basically, not counting these reviews on the overall score is giving a disingenuous perception of what people feel about the product. You are actively censoring people's protests. And I don't want to sound like Soygon of a COD with everything is censorship, but this is literal censorship. Not allowing people to display their frustration with how the product was handled. Now I get it, the goal is to show legit reviews with legit criticisms, but relying on a computer tool to do it seems asinine. Computers don't make good judgment. I guarantee you in this process, legit negative reviews are also being removed too, by accident. Because like I said, computers have a tendency to fuck up. After the tool has identified possibly troublesome reviews, there we go again, troublesome. We're going down a slippery slope at this point because this computer tool gets to dictate what's troublesome. Anyways, it will inform Valve and the company will then begin an investigation. If Valve decides the user reviews are an off-topic bomb, the company will inform the developer that every review within the time period of the review bomb will be removed from the game's overall Steam score. At this point, however, the user reviews will still be live. It will be up to the developer's discretion over which are deleted. Oh my god. So basically, what Valve is saying is they're gonna hand these over to the developers whether they want those reviews to stay up or not. Of course they're not going to want them to stay up. Of course not. Even if said developer did something to really fuck up and piss off consumers, they will be given these things on a silver platter basically and told they can do whatever they want with it. Handing over reviews to the people that created the product and they get to decide what to do with it. Not sure I really like that idea. The downside to this process is that every user review during an off-topic review bomb will be removed from a game's overall Steam score. Even the good ones. But as we mentioned back in our first user review post, our data shows us that review bombs tend to be temporary distortions, so we believe the review score will still be accurate and other players will still be able to find and read your review within the period. Valve wrote, plenty of negative comments that focus on DRM or EULA changes will also be considered off-topic review bombings as well. Fuck. Really? So now we can't even voice our frustrations with DRM and EULA changes. We can't even do that now. And if we do, it's up to the developers to decide whether they want to keep that or not. Developers who don't want this new tool combing through their game's comments and Valve declaring when an off-topic review bomb is happening can opt out of the process by going into their Steam store options. Valve is working on a few more changes to user reviews as well, but they'll be shipped out at a later date. I don't like it one bit. We're going down a very slippery slope. We're allowing computers to decide what reviews are appropriate or not. Then Steam gets to come in, look at the voiced concerns, even if it involves DRM and EULA, which I think are perfectly fair to involve in reviews, and then basically handing them over to developers and allowing them to decide what they want to keep or not. Of course, in this industry, everything is dealt with extremes. Voicing concerns is no longer something that they're going to allow you to do. Well, not so much that they won't allow you to do, they just won't allow it to affect the overall score of a game, and they'll take your voiced complaints and hand it over to developers so they can wipe their asses with it. Like I said, it's a slippery slope. How far would they go with this? Letting developers decide what's a proper review? Letting a computer make the first judgment? It's ridiculous. Thankfully, it's been brought to my attention by Griffin Gaming that in the Steam settings, you can choose to view those off-topic reviews. But just the very fact that Steam has set it to the default that you won't be able to view these things is concerning. All in all, My thoughts on review bombing is that it's an excellent tool to use at the right time against the right company and the right developers. Otherwise, it's something that's so easily abused, and I can see why they would take measures against it. But to take the measures to such extremes is beyond me. And most of my Twitter followers seem to agree that review bombing can be a good practice when used against the right targets. But as for my YouTube audience, I don't know. You guys tell me, is this measure too extreme? Is it the right measure to take? Or should no measures against review bombing be taken? Anyways, I've said my part. There's your fucking video. Now go jerk off to it, and I'll be seeing all of you again very soon.
Fritanga sucks ass.